Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Overlander Overview Show. It's a World Championship special. It's a bit of a trip down memory lane for those people who like pulling a few gems out from the vault. We're going to look in detail at the last 5 World Championships. It reminds me a little bit of when we were talking about badminton and Burley coming back this year. 5-star is back. Well, the World Championships are back. It's been 4 years since we've had one. But what's it going to look like? We gave you the glass half full and the glass half empty scenarios with 5-star. Could we see record scores? Well, we did. We did at Badminton and Kentucky this year. Could we see them again? Could we see record scores in Pratoni? Of course we could. We'll discuss that. But could we see this kind of age that we're in of the modern horse being challenged? Because there is nothing more challenging historically than a World Championship course. And that's why I want to take you back to Jerez, take you back to Aachen, take you back to Kentucky, Con and Tryon, look at the trends and look at what we could be treated by or with at Pratoni this year. So World Championship special. I never start the show without saying where the Overlander has been. The 2-horse truck. It's been... Well, Sparks has been taking it around, if I'm being honest. She's been out in it this morning. Water treadmills. It's my new thing. Love it. Found a water treadmill down the road. That's what the Overlander has been doing. The competition horses have been going down there. Great for core strength. So that's the new thing. So anyone, maybe we'll have a water treadmill show coming to you very soon because they're quite cool. I'm joined for this memory lane trip for this World Championship analysis. I'm joined by the A-team, the dream team. Diarm Byrne, I'll come to you first. How are you?
Good. Thanks, pal. Yeah, all roads lead to Rome at the moment. So I'm professionally quite excited about it and personally quite excited about it as I'll be leaving Ireland towards a sunnier climate and one where I can have pizza and wine to my heart's content. So, no, very excited. All good.
You've just had your trousers altered, haven't you? I mean, are you sure that pizza and wine? It's too personal.
In private conversation, Sam, about my trouser alterations, I'll tell you the truth, though, it wasn't actually around the waist. It was actually around the legs. They were too long for me. They were the ones I got married in. And I thought, I'm going to reuse these trousers. They could be used again, but... yeah, they were just too long on the bottom. So no, too long on the bottom, too long at the bottom of the trousers. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Nicole Brown, save us. How are you? How are things?
I could just see Dee's discomfort as he dug himself further into the hole about, which part of his trousers needed altering. Good. I'm looking forward to this conversation, actually, because there is one World Championships that I think will take people by surprise as we reminisce. It's one that every time I see some of the numbers that have come out of it, I do a little double take. And I'm looking forward to chatting about it in more detail.
I think I'm going to take you straight there, Nicole. It was a little bit of an outlier in many ways. We've talked about the improvement in dressage relentlessly over the last really 15 years now. But when I analyze the top 10 of the last 5 World Championships, and I look at where the penalties came from, what the scores looked like, and whether things are changing. Back in Jerez in 2002, the top 10 had an average dressage score of 26 in current money when we convert to this currency. That is actually the best. The closest is Tryon back in 2018, where the top 10 averaged a dressage score of 26.8, again in our current scoring system. So not much between them, and actually Jerez a little bit better. Now, some of that has to be dressage, judging, outlier stuff. But at the same time, we've also got to, also remember that the best have always been brilliant. That we get that in every sport. But in terms of what it takes to win, if we looked at Aachen 4 years later, back in 2006, the top 10 averaged a dressage score of 32. So that's a lot higher than the 26 we saw back in Jerez. that's the first conversation. And the question where I'm going to point that to, I'm sure you guys will want to unpick different things from that, a few name drops and things like that. You're more than welcome to. But are we going to see it beaten? Is the key here. Now, this is not the top 10 after dressage. This is the final top 10. What will their dressage scores be averaging? What will they be looking like? And can that 26 from 2002 be beaten? We got close in 2018, but it's not been beaten yet. Will it be beaten this year? Nicole Brown, what do you think? Firstly, take us through some of the names that jump out at you from that 2002 year, and then some of the names that jump out at you from 2022, 20 years later.
It's funny because actually, lowest average of the top 10 starting in the first phase at 26.0, but actually, nobody finished on their dressage score. Nobody even got close to finishing on their dressage score. Nobody made the time that year. There were very few show jumping clears, and it was absolute chaos. So it started off in exceptional form, and actually the rest of the competition kind of threw the leaderboard on its head. It was Jean Hilaire and Espoir de la Mer who actually ended up world champions that year. But the big number that I wanted to talk about is that of the dressage record, because it's the record dressage score that we have seen at a world championships. And to be honest, I would think, and we might double check this, that any championship full stop, because I can't think of a Europeans or an Olympics that have got a better record dressage score. Bettina Hoy, Woodside's Ashby, who was that lovely grey horse. Bettina was always excellent in the first phase. Anyway, 13.9. So when we bandy around whether we'll see a new dressage record this year, and we've got the likes of Fisher Chipmunk and Michael Young, Laura Collett and London 52, on any other occasion, I'd be like, could well see a new record. This year, right, well, 13.9, none of them break into the teens that regularly. So it is going to be a fairly tall order.
Yeah, it's probably not going to happen. I think there's an element to dressage judges always as well, trying to keep the sport anchored around a certain mark as well. I mean, I know we are seeing a growth in teen dressages and very low 20s. And I know sometimes the Germans give out about it, that they feel that a really good test, it might get a 25. The Olympics had a habit, in both London and Rio, and a little bit to an extent in Tokyo, but I think possibly more mistake driven in Tokyo, where they would score a bit higher. A lot of horses coming into that championship were scoring lower in their general 4 stars, and then at the Olympic Games they would score higher. The judges obviously play a role in what the scores are going to be. But Nicole, you touched on it with the other 2 phases. So the top 10 averaged an addition of 7.2 penalties in the show jumping. Now, we've not seen that anywhere else. So in Cannes in 2014, they added on average 3.6 penalties, so nearly a fence. And then in the cross country, they added on average 10 cross country time penalties. This is back in Jerez in 2002. So the top 10 were on average adding 17.3 penalties to their dressage score. Now, that's a massive amount. And the year that is most is kind of polar opposite to that was 2010 in Kentucky, when on average the top 10 were only adding 0.4 to their score in the show jumping and 0.8 to their score in terms of cross-country time penalties. So actually only 1.2. So Kentucky, in a way, looked, particularly when you look at the top of the leaderboard, it looked like one of the first sort of dressage competitions. Jerez certainly wasn't. Then in Cannes in 2014, it completely flipped, but completely weather-driven, really. I mean, maybe not with the show jumping because it was on an all-weather surface, but maybe horses feeling the impact of going through the mud the day before. And the question is we know the Pratoni Hills won't be... Well, Pratoni, even if it does rain in Pratoni, it's, volcanic soil, it'll drain through. It's nearly better in the rain. But what are we going to see on Cross Country Day?
Can I just say that the last championships we saw at Pratoni was in 2007 when they held the European Championships, and the cross-country jumping clear rate was 33%, which is the toughest day across country at any major championship going back to 2002. That counts the Europeans, the Olympics, the World Championships. To put it into context with an average 5-star, you would generally see, I think globally, the average clear rate at 5-star is about 54%. So 33%, that's like carnage.
Outrageous.
And that was Pratoni 2007. Now, obviously, we're 15 years on. It's a World Championships, not a Europeans. Things are different, but just putting it out there.
No, but you're right. So one of the things that changed. So when we look at Tryon actually has the lowest cross country penalty add. Again, looking at that top 10, they're adding on average only 0.4. So 1 second on cross country. There weren't many cross country penalties added by the top finishers, and the entire field jumping clear at a rate of 67%, much higher than normal. So cross country wasn't as influential, and that was because it was the first championship where we had a 4-star cross country rather than 5-star. But the Europeans that you mentioned are also, back then would have been, a star below the top level. They weren't back then. It was 4-star, and the Europeans were a 3-star championship. So Giuseppe and Pratoni are well capable, regardless of the classification and the star level. Give them a championship, and they might just get tricky. And how do you think that upsets the apple cart then a little bit? Because the mega stat from this show, and this really is mind blowing, is that in the last 10 World Championships, Team GB have medaled every single time as a team. They have been on that team podium in all of the last 10 World Championships. That is a streak that is just phenomenal. They're your reigning team gold medalists. They're your reigning team Olympic medalists. They're very high on Prediction Center for a team competition. Is there anything? Are they vulnerable? Basically, that's the question. Is there in what circumstances, Nicole, could you see them missing the podium in Pratoni?
I think they're very, very strong. I don't think you can discount that sometimes, crazy things can happen. I don't think it's a sure thing. I don't think it's a given by any stretch of the imagination. I can see why they're strong. You look at the team that they would be taking, and at the time of recording this, listeners, the team hasn't been announced. So purely on speculation, you've got 3 members of the team that won Olympic gold medals last year, an individual silver medalist in Toledo de Curse, Tom McEwen. You've got Laura Collett, London 52, who set a record finishing score at badminton. Oliver Townend's Ballamore class, who's been to 5-star level 7 times, never been outside the top 5. Like, I would presume they're going to be on the team. Ros Cantor Lordship's Graffalo, who was second at badminton, again, one of the best performances we've seen by a 10-year-old. And then you look at the horses outside of that, Yazing and Banzai de Loire, who was second at Kentucky, Kitty King, Vendredi Biatz, who've been top 10 individually at 2 European Championships. The list goes on. That's not even talking about Karue, Sarah Bullimore, who were individual bronze at the Europeans last year. For me, the strength and depth is their biggest strength, ultimately, because they, no matter the combination of combinations that they take, they should all be very, very strong.
Yeah, but I'll counter that. You can't. The depth is brilliant now, and it's driving up performance all the time. But you can't bring your depth with you. You just have to bring your 4 with you. And what Bam, and we talked a lot about this with 5-star coming back. The modern event horse is not as natural a cross country animal as it used to be. A horse who potentially falls into that, I think, of the ones that you've mentioned, is maybe London 52. Absolutely stunning in the first phase, and Chipmunk as well. And Chipmunk has had his, he's had his flag, he's had his pin. his flag attack.
There's not many more penalties that he can get away with on bad luck now, to be honest.
But is it bad luck? Like okay, the pin, yes, I think so. The flag, if running is not natural to you, things like going out through a shoulder when you're really in top gear. The whole point is when you used to watch these horses going around 5 stars 15, 20 years ago, they looked very within themselves. And that was kind of the style at which you did it. Now that the sport, arguably more professional, more depth and things like that, where there's more people going further out of the comfort zone. But we're also doing it with a horse that's not designed to gallop quite as much, not as much thoroughbred in them. The hills at Pratoni, I think, could bring in more what I would call unforced errors, where you just see little mistakes. I don't think you can put Toledo's mistake at Badminton into that bracket. I don't think you can at all. But there were definitely mistakes late on in the course at Badminton from other riders, really towards the end of the course, where you start to say that's concentration under fatigue. That is how a lot of tennis players, rugby players, Formula One drivers, everybody is training to still be at their best towards the end of the course when fatigue starts to kick in. Could we see, a Lordship's Graffalo who is younger? I mean, he seems perfect. I'm really clutching at straws trying to pick holes in him, because he's one of the most exciting 10-year-olds we've ever seen. But a 10-year-old hasn't won a 5-star since Ballamore Class over 5 years ago when he won Burghley. The last 10-year-old world championship champion was Livius at Exam. Is there a reason for that? Is the modern horse going to be a little bit more vulnerable on a championship course? Just again, fatigue, concentration. Could we see Lordship's Graffalo making a mistake? It seems mad to say it when there's no evidence of mistakes. It could be possible. What about London? And because all it takes is one to trip up and one to glance off, and then I think GB are off.
Well, aren't you just a bag full of smiles, Sam Watson? Honestly, no, you are right. It doesn't take a lot for something to go wrong, and we've had it before. If you looked at the British team that went to the Rio Olympic Games in 2016,
the German team, Nickers. The German team
in 2016, the strongest rated team on record, and they go and have 3 problems on the cross country, and it was almost unheard of. 3 of the 4 team members had a problem, and there was no way we saw that coming. So I don't think you can say it's in the bag. It's not bulletproof. They have an unbelievably strong chance, but they're not bulletproof. I also think actually that sometimes when you go in with that much pressure, you are kind of the ones that everybody is looking at, and sometimes you can be a team that's a little bit more under the radar. We've seen it with a number of squads that have made it onto the podium in the last few years, that actually you just have that slight nothing to lose edge. And actually that can be highly effective and quite dangerous with the other teams. So look, very, very strong Brits, 10 world championship podiums in 10 years or in 10 championships is just madness. They're the reigning Olympic, world and European champions. It's very hard to look past them here. And I'm looking at other teams being announced, and I'm still kind of feeling pretty confident of the Brits. But
they're strong. And look, this isn't so much because we'll get into, there will be endless Pratoni previews coming up. It's much more, as I say, it's a little bit like when we were talking about 5-star coming back. It's this, when we look at Jerez and Caen as 2 outliers, really, with adding that many, when you see that the final top 10 have added on average over 10 cross-country penalties, over 25 seconds to their score, and adding a rail to almost 2 rails in Jerez, a lot of show jumping penalties as well. I don't expect to see those extremes because there's a weather element to it. But the really low scoring of Tryon and Kentucky, I'm not sure if we're going to see that either. And I think that's the key. And I think that there is I mean, I'll be honest about it. I think when the competitions don't offer up that drama in the jumping phases, I fall a little bit out of love with the sport. You know, it's not as interesting and it's not as exciting. But the angle I would be taking here, I'm full of optimism when I look back, and I'm even full of optimism, which is a strange thing to say because in many ways, the 5 stars so far this season have had. We've seen horses out of the comfort zone, which is not always what we're looking for. But I think Giuseppe and Pratoni combined I think we'll see the same thing of people moving out of the comfort zone, but probably it's going to be run outs. It's like what springs out with that Europeans, Nicole, where the targets, people running past fences. He's going to place fences in very, very cleverly. And I think anyone who thinks that we are heading for just the records, which I do, we'll get to record finishing scores because I do think that will be broken. But anyone who thinks we're just heading for low scoring, big dressage, and then a dressage competition, and it's very low scoring, I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see some upset.
Question for you, Sam. I mean, one, how excited would we all be if the targets made a return 15 years later? We walk the course, down the slide, there's the targets, the nightmares keep coming for people. But if that fence was in a course today, 15 years on, have horses, you talk about horses having changed, but have they become that much more adept at accuracy questions such as that actually those targets on a course today would cause not nearly as many problems as they did 15 years ago?
Yes, you're correct. Skinnies are much more normal and horses jump them much more frequently, that even when they are put off balance by the slopes, they can still jump them. Now, there weren't many other tricks aside from just the slope and the targets being used back then. And Giuseppe Della Chiesa is so aware and in tune of every single way to test both horse and rider that I think he will use that slope he is cunning. He will be thinking, he's aware of it, where the distance that he places fences off bends and turns, because he knows about the shoulder coming out on the turn, and he knows about the time taken to set up for fences. He's going to use every trick in the book, and they're not really tricks. It's complete course builder intelligence or course designer intelligence that I think he will. And he wouldn't let us, he calls it the slide. He says, when you come to Pratoni, you must go down the slide, but he didn't send them down the slide in the Nations Cup because I don't want to give it away. He makes
it sound so much fun, doesn't he? The slide, the Pratoni slide. It sounds like a day out at the park, when in reality, it's not.
But I guess the question is, because the critics of some people called Tryon, they said they lost interest. I talked to another course designer that I would respect, and he said it just wasn't challenging enough. Now, Tryon still caught, it springs to mind Chris Burton going past the boat. I think
half
Shane
the American
Rose,
team.
Yeah, the Americans, the Kiwis, the Americans, and the Aussies were all really caught out by Tryon. It had a hill now at the end. I think the key with Pratoni is you got to go down the hill, as well as, that's the big thing. Going downhill is slow. It's time. It might not use up too much fuel, but you can't go fast downhill on a horse. You have to slow down. That brings time penalties into it. Then he sends you back up the hill, and that does use up energy. Well, he sends you up the hill first, then you got to come down it, and that's the big hill. Then you got to go up a little hill, which is a long, slow one. You got to come down that again. Then you play around on the flat. So there's enough up and downs that's going to slow you down and make the time more influential. And again, high level trends in the sport, horses are not getting faster. Time penalties at 5-star have been creeping up a little bit. But you mentioned, Bettina Hoy's crazy dressage scores, and I agree with you that they won't be touched. The finishing scores, Diarm, the best 5 finishing scores that we've seen in the sport at World Championship level all came at either Kentucky or Tryon. The best came at Kentucky, 22 in today's scoring system. from Le Aesthetic Sam, Michael Young. He's probably the most likely person to challenge that, although Laura Collett might have something to say about that. Then 3 in Tryon, Roz Cantor 24.6, Porg McCarthy 27.2, and SAP Hale Bob 27.3. And then Cool Mountain from Kentucky is the 5th best world championship score of 28. Now that is interesting because we used to talk about 28 as being the winning threshold. Now we were more saying that 25 is the new 28. That's another overview show that's in the back catalogue. Now, if someone gets below 28, they're going into the top 5 best world championship scores that we've seen. Now, surely that is an absolute banker to happen. And do we see 4 or 5 horses going below 28?
I'm not surprised by the final score, but I'm really surprised by that 28. I'm really surprised that the 5th best score that we've seen is as high as that. Is that because we're being treated to much, much lower scores at the 5 stars by people at the top end of that? Is it because even Tokyo, I think, would include lower scores? If we were including this as the World Games and the Olympics, we would have scores below 28. It feels to me like it's about to get caught up massively when you see, it's 4 years. And even in that 4 years, you would be reasonably confident that you could have, horses that will start on it. You're right. Woodside's Ashby will not be challenged in that dressage test. But to be honest, that feels like such an outlier. 13.9 is not a dressage test that you see at. There isn't a test in British eventing this year, which is below 14. I think 14.5. That includes 80s, 90s, 100s. 13.9 back in 2002 feels like a wild outlier. So on the basis that won't be touched. London with Laura, My Bomb with Tammy Smith, and Fisher Chipmunk and Michael Young. All of them, I think, can challenge the 22 of Sam and Michael Young back in Kentucky, not just the 28. It's a good spot, and I think I would expect, the sport to catch up with those records and possibly 3 or 4 go within there. But I don't appreciate as much as someone who hasn't the kind of horse knowledge that you will have, and secondly the experience of Pratoni and the depth of knowledge that you guys can talk about Giuseppe and the hills. Like, what does it compare to like the Blair Europeans 2015, or compared to a Chatsworth? Is it a different type of hill, or is it something that we should just disregard the opening score in dressage, almost like you do at Chatsworth, because you think, how many people finish under dressage score here? One in 100 or 1 in 90. So it's really not that. It really doesn't matter where you start as long as you're within touching distance. Do you expect FODs here essentially?
Yeah, I do. I think that I think it's going to be, it's shades of grey, and it's both. Like I said, the glass half full is that we'll see records at 5-star this year. The glass half empty is that we'll see the modern horse struggling at 5-star. That was in our sort of 5-star preview overview show. And the reality is that we've seen both. We've seen Fisher Chipmunk and London 52 posting 2 of the 3 lowest 5-star scores in history. And we've seen horses struggling at 5-star level. So I think as long as you're going 570 meters per minute on land, the modern professional riders on any horse, Michael Young, what he did on the 8-year-old Fisher Takanu around Blair was insane, and it shows you what they can do. So I think people will FOD, and I'm going to bring you to another super stat, which is that I expect Andrew Hoy to be here in the World Championships in Pratoni with Vasilis Lassos. It would be a disaster if he's not. That will give him 8 Olympic Games and 8 World Championships. which is an incredible tally. It's an incredible career. But where I'm going is that he is an individual bronze in the Olympic Games and an individual silver at Olympic Games level. He does not have an individual gold medal at either. And his best world championship finish is fourth. Now that came in trial. Can he, when you see that when you look at those best finishing scores and you think that actually the horses that are capable of going below 28 or finishing below 28, they're not bulletproof. Like we have to remember from Toledo at badminton, from Fisher Chipmunk at both Aachen and Tokyo, they're not bulletproof. And this is what I'm kind of opening the door, are these horses that are starting around the 27 mark, do they have a chance of winning? And therefore, does that open the door? Because the FOD banker has to be Vasily Delassos. There's not a horse in the world that has a stronger chance of finishing on his dressage score than him. Imagine and I'm not going to call it a sign out because I know he's got Paris in his sights, but that's the level of excitement. That's the kind of angle that I would present to everybody. I think that could happen. And I think that's a championship worth getting very excited about, that a 27 could win, and that could be Vasily Delassos, but it's could. Like, I think between them, Chipmunk
how many start ahead of him? Like in my head, he's just inside the top 10.
After dressage, no,
I'd
not
say
that high.
further down. No,
Yeah,
further down.
16th.
I'd say top 20.
What you have to remember, Nicole, I know that's where he was in Harris Dupin. What you have to remember is that there's 5 Brits and there's 5 Germans. There's a couple of US maybe. It depends which way the Team New Zealand go, because but even Falco's not been hitting massively low. Like, actually the landscape of other teams are not incredibly strong. Australia, I mean, he's the big hitter from Australia.
I guess the reason I say it is, if we look at the last however many championships we've had, and this is just going off the top of my head, Olympics last year were down in the early 20s, Europeans early 20s. I think the 20 was Nicola Wilson or Ros Cantor, who led the Europeans. Then we go back to previous ones before that, even going back as far as Tryon, we're again looking in those low 20s. Like, low 20s is more than a fence ahead of where I think Vasily will start. He will really come into his own if those time penalties start to pick up. If it's a tough day on cross country and speed comes to the fore and the show jumps are falling, that is when he will really, really climb. And so that is a Jerez and a Caen year. If we have a Tryon or a Kentucky year, he has much more work to do.
Yeah, but I think I 100% agree with it. But I think that we're all lulled a little bit by what we see in day-to-days, 4-star shorts and things like that. Forgetting about that a world championship is a level up from, like, it's probably in the sport now, the world championship is probably where you have the license to build the most challenging cross-country track, because there's kind of unwritten stuff. I think Derek DeGracia, there was a lot of pressure on him with Tokyo, with climate, with the global audience, with developing and emerging nations, to look after the sport a little bit. There's a big responsibility on you with the Olympic Games to not push people too far out of the comfort zone and push horses too far out of the comfort zone. The Europeans can be difficult. The last couple that we've seen, I think last year in Avanche was the second championship of the year. So I don't, you knew you weren't going to have the best of the best. You were having almost a second tier in a way. I know the British team weren't a second tier. They were that strong. And then Limoux, recent European championships have been on difficult tracks to really test people. my point would be looking at World Championship trends, looking, as you highlighted, Pratoni Championship. I think the evidence is there. And I know we always want to do this because we said it with Tryon in advance of Tryon, but this is more disruptive than I think than we think it's going to be.
I want that for the sport, and the excitement you mentioned it is a bit more fun when you get engaged immediately with whatever way we want to. I mean, this is probably too much for the finish of an overview show, but the drama is a huge part of what makes the sport exciting. And when you get, let's be honest, Tokyo and Tryon were not dramatic cross-country days. Even like great competitions like Aachen, we had to save the drama for the kind of very final rider, and even at that, it had to go to a grand jury. The biggest moment was happening in a box, not in front of cameras, but like, you know, an hour later when Michael Young wasn't the winner of Aachen. It happened away from the screens. We want if we want Vasily to be a world champion for the sport, and I don't really mind who's the world champion, but in terms of what that would mean for the competition, I think he has to be jumping in the top two, if I'm honest, on the final day. I cannot. 1 in 3 jump clear, let's say, and he's not in the top 5. You've how many times have we seen it? Even if the leader drops, it's unlikely that the front 2 drop or the front 3 drop enough rails. I would be trying to ensure that, or not ensure, but I see it as that if you're going to have Vasily, you're going to need him to do all his climbing on cross country day, and then be within a rail or be within 2 rails, because any horse can have a bad one. My worry, Sam, is that I think, if I'm putting my heart here rather than my head, my heart would say to me, there's 3 or 4 or 5 that London can have problems. We know that. Chipmunk can have problems. We know that. My bomb can have problems. None of them are as bad as the recent. You know, like they're not all likely to have problems, but they all can have problems. You can extend that list on a little bit more. My feeling is that they won't all have problems. That there'll still be someone who goes in there 5 marks ahead of Vasily. Even if 2 of them have runouts, there's still someone who'll go in there with a bigger lead. I think it's very difficult to win big competitions in eventing now if you can't get below 25. See previous overview show.
So of the 3, the third stat here, and to round up, and I'll let you guys have last word on it. But Bruce Davidson Senior is the only rider to have 3 individual World Championship medals. They come from 74, 78, and then I think fast forwarding into sort of late 80s, early 90s. Michael Young could catch him. He's got an individual gold and individual silver. So the question is does Michael Young become the second rider in history to have 3 individual World Championships? 1, do Great Britain extend their run to now 11 consecutive World Championship team medals? That's 2. And the last one, does Andrew Hoy win his first individual World Championship medal? Those 3 questions. Do all 3 happen? Diarm Byrne, last words.
I've hung around with you long enough to know that the correct answer to this is like all of them can happen. All of them are probably more likely than not to happen in an individual sense. Not more likely than not.
That's interesting.
Sorry, they're not more likely than not.
I fully agree with you on the British thing. Like we've never seen a team so nailed on to win a medal. I just wonder, I think recent trends might cause the prediction model, and it might cause the algorithms to potentially exaggerate just how likely Britain are to win a medal. I think that one might not be as likely as the numbers will say. And then possibly it reverses then for Mickey Young. And then I'm not sure about the Andrew Hoy one as well, but they all have a chance.
They're all really what's great. I mean, to finish up with, because this show in particular is very much more focused on the numbers than on the stories, but all of those are brilliant stories. And what got me excited listening to this is one takeaway from it is that we all expect and would like cross country to be the critical element of what decides eventing competitions generally, and in particular World Games. We sometimes have to bend for IOC and for the Olympics and for flags, but for World Games to keep eventing where we want it to be, we want cross country to be influential and for it to be meaningful and for it to be a good day for fans, for us to actually come off the back and be texting each other rather than Brits win again all under dressage scores. We want it to be good, we want it to be fun. For that to happen, what got me excited about this is the Giuseppe element. Someone who loves the sport, thinks about the sport, and on home soil has all of the resources, natural resources available to him to make this a special event and a special showcase for eventing. Something that I think you're bringing together one of the most modern thinkers of the sport with one of the most traditional thinkers of the sport too. And as I say, with Pratoni, somewhere that's so close to his heart, and with the World Games, it feels to me like the Saturday of the World Games could be and should be a wonderful, wonderful showcase and a wonderful day for fans. That's the bit that is coming from me, I suppose, coming across for me from what you've been talking about.
Oh, that's good, because I don't think we quite had it in Tokyo, but I can see why. I think it was important for the sport, and I just think there's enough going on in Pratoni to make it more disruptive. Nicole Brown, British fan number 1.
Yes, they get a medal. Andrew Hoy, I'm going to say, finishes 5th. And what was the last thing? What was the last one?
Mickey Young, does he become the only third rider to win an individual? Now, it's not just gold, it's an individual medal.
Does.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Very hard to see him not winning an individual medal.
I think the biggest...
Until last year, when both the Europeans and the Olympics ruined it for him last year, he had won an individual medal at every single championship he had ridden at. And there's plenty of them going back every year to like 2009.
Yeah,
imagine where he keeps them all. Do we reckon he has some kind of massive bunker underneath his house that's just...
Who?
Michael Young, all the medals. Like, he's got trillions of them. He has a bunker under his house. Anyway, sorry, going off piste, listeners, off piste.
No, I agree with you. I think in that situation, it is, we could have gone into more British people, but it feels like there probably isn't space for both Michael and Andrew, because it only leaves one more space on the podium. That's the reality of it. I think, as I said, I think possibly for the first time in a while, I just think we could see more disruption and more of those drama moments. Think about badminton had it been a team competition. I know the clear rate was quite high at badminton. It was up around 65%, which is nearly 10% above that 5-star average. So horses did get around, but there were some horses that were held, and that there were a lot of holes that day, and that helps to keep your energy up. I think if badminton had been a team competition, definitely there was, again, this word disruption, and that's what we want to see, because it's drama. Thank you, folks, for your contribution. Thank you, everybody, to tuning in. It's really it's not the beginning, because there's plenty of Pratoni shows there already, but we're ramping up. We are getting within a month of the World Championships. There will be loads of content coming, so not just from the Overlander overview shows, guys, but the entire Echo Ratings Eventing podcast team and the Echo Ratings social media channels. So stay tuned. Thanks for coming in and listening to this one, and we'll talk to you again soon. Overlander is the new brand of 2-stall horse trucks. They've invested heavily in 5 years of R&D to produce a product that is built for purpose and built to last. I'm Sam Watson, Irish Olympian and proud ambassador of Overlander vehicles. And I can tell you firsthand that this is a beautiful, strong, seriously easy to operate and seriously horse-friendly truck. For me, this is an asset that is so well built and designed that my investment is going to hold its value really well. These trucks will last a lifetime, and for those of you who might not be sure about making that investment, Overlander make it so easy for you, because you can get your hands on one of these beautiful 2-stall horse boxes for a small monthly payment. This is a brand that has been a long time in development, and it is undoubtedly here for the long haul. Visit overlandervehicles.co.uk for details.